Drive Waco.
All right, so yesterday one of the stories was former LSU, Oklahoma State, Kansas head coach Les Miles. The NCAA agreement with LSU vacated some wins he had in Baton Rouge, and he's suing LSU because it might keep him out of the College Football Hall of Fame. Mike Scarborough, great person to have when it comes to LSU. Anything from TigerBait.com joins us on 365 Sports. What was the reaction down in Baton Rouge and LSU country when that story popped? Yeah, well, it popped, but when that story came out yesterday.
A lot of laughter. It's one of those deals where you don't really have to be an attorney to realize that lawsuit isn't going to go very far. And then we had one of our guys that's the unofficial official attorney of Tiger Bait break it down, and he really has no standing. And honestly, I don't believe it's actually Les himself that's provoking this. I'm not sure, what his capacities are the last few years. I think it's more his family trying to solidify his legacy. The bottom line is, had he not taken the Kansas job and lost a lot of football games, he wouldn't have the winning percentage that he has now. He would be in the Hall of Fame. It's the losses at Kansas that did him in. And so, LSU's athletic department and their attorneys negotiating with the NCAA when they got in trouble over Vidal Alexander and Our Lady of the Lake and all that stuff that went down years ago. And you also had the men's basketball program under the microscope. Well, they basically, gave themselves some self penalties and then made some deals, and that has nothing to do with Les Miles. So, to say that LSU officials said that they would see I don't know what led them to believe that, but I told someone yesterday, I said, this would be the equivalent of in 2020, LSU self-imposing sanctions on themselves by foregoing a postseason bowl game, and then that'd be the equivalent of the Texas Bowl suing LSU because the team they took didn't bring a big enough crowd, and had they had LSU, that they would have made more money on their bowl game. That's not how it works.
It's a great analogy. Thank you, Mike, for using that one. Craig?
Mike, what is the general consensus if you were to talk to, average LSU fan about Les Miles? How do folks down there feel about him at this point?
Look, it depends on who they are. You've got a whole lot of people that still hold him as a beloved figure in LSU athletics history. Whereas I think the majority of your hardcore football people probably feel that he overstayed his welcome by 5 to 7 years. And, there's a lot of posts yesterday, and we were having some fun, saying that we ought to sue him for pain and suffering for, the last handful of years of awful offense that he subjected us to, despite having Odell Beckham and Jarvis Landry and Fournette and everybody else.
Yeah, I can understand that. I remember those frustrations watching LSU's offense to be like, how is it possible to not be this or not be better when you have some of these freakazoids that they had at that point?
Who was more frustrating to watch, Iowa's offense or LSU's offense with Les Miles?
Iowa.
That's close. That's close. But now the shoe's on the other foot. It's been LSU's defense.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, Mike, is there hope that that's going to change this season? As LSU, it seems like they're kind of, just going about their business with Brian Kelly. I don't feel like I'm seeing them in the headlines all that often necessarily. It seems like a lot of the talk in the SEC is revolving around DeBoer or Georgia or the new schools. Where does LSU kind of fall in line with things you feel like, and is the defense going to be one of those things that can bring about a resurgence on that side of the ball?
You're absolutely right. LSU's kind of in that next tier down. They're not getting a whole lot of ink. I think probably when the preseason top 25s get revealed by everybody else, she's probably going to be somewhere between, 11 and 15. but the schedule is real favorable. They just got to, win that opener in Las Vegas against USC. They've got another primetime Sunday night Labor Day weekend opener, and that's going to be a big one. And LSU and USC are real similar, losing Heisman Trophy quarterbacks, both with putrid defenses and trying to get things on the right track. But if you look at LSU's schedule, it really does set up for them. But the defensive line is still, in my mind, probably the worst I've seen at LSU in the last 30 years. And so I know you got new coaches. Bo Davis, obviously from Texas. Peoples is a renowned ends coach. Can they put it all together with some of the transfers and make a go of it and come up with unique ways to disguise what their limitations are? We'll see. But, I think I told another media guy last week, I said, if this was an LSU team playing an SEC schedule or playing 10 years ago, I think this team's probably 8-4 or 7-5. But when you look around, when you look at the schedule and you look at the issues that a lot of the teams have because of the parity and the transfer portal, it's kind of like, man, who are they going to lose to? Right now, Vegas only has them as an underdog in one game, and that's at A&M. So, while I think most years in the last 20 years they'd be an 8-4 team, I'm wondering if they can actually get to 9-3 or 10-2. But the defensive line and corner is still a big issue, and that's what they're trying to get fixed in recruiting. And you just can't go where you have so many years in a row with new defensive line coaches and new defensive coordinators every year.
Garrett, do you have a question for Mike?
Yeah, Mike, I'm curious where LSU is at right now with DeCorian Moore. I know they were really high on him. Texas got into the mix right now. He was on campus this weekend. Where are the Tigers at right now with him, and how much of an emphasis is the Texas push with the Longhorns because they're actually in the SEC now?
Yeah, I think that benefits Texas. LSU obviously wants him. It used to be when a kid was committed to you for so long, decommitted, you were no longer a factor with him. The fact that he came back to LSU and visited a couple of weekends ago, I think is pretty notable. But this is absolutely an NIL deal, and we're going to see where it plays out. I talked to a Texas source. There was a defensive tackle in the portal a couple of months ago that LSU and Texas were both after, and he ended up in Oklahoma, and both LSU and Texas walked away because the money got too crazy. So most people would obviously say Texas has more money to spend collectively in NIL dollars, but I also don't think that they get crazy with it. But I will say this, the kid is a fantastic prospect. I think his 5-star rating is absolutely justified. But at the same time, having covered recruiting and LSU's history with wide receivers, I don't think a wide receiver is going to break LSU's football program.
Yeah, no, probably not. Of all the positions, yeah, that'd be the one you feel pretty good about. Does Baton Rouge have a Lamborghini dealership? That's the big question to get into the battles with Texas potentially.
Now, is that true that those were actually rented it for $500 a piece to park there?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Who knows? Yeah,
I don't know.
I was told they were rented. I was told that all those they rented those for $500 a pop to have them parked there.
Well, I know when Bijan got his, I think it was a lease. So, that's the only thing I've ever really heard about it, though. I don't know about when they're displaying them, on campus and whatnot.
Well, look, I go to practice. I park in the lot. I see what the vehicles are. These guys, obviously, good for them. They've got a lot of disposable income. They get all their meals paid for. They've got housing if they want it. But a lot of them have gotten to the point now where they're buying homes in upscale neighborhoods in Baton Rouge, and good for them.
Yeah, it's a totally different era for sure. It's definitely the player era and probably long overdue. So, Mike, I guess what would you say is the biggest question still looming for LSU as we're here in these summer months? I mean, defensively, you mentioned that, but replacing your quarterback. I mean, how do you kind of view all of that? What's just sort of still out there that's mysterious in any way for LSU football?
I think LSU's offense is going to be still very salty. They're going to be hard to stop. I think it's going to be tailored a little bit different. They're going to want to establish the run. I think they want to have a much better time of possession to give the defense. They don't want the defense on the field much at all. The biggest issue is going to be that defensive front, and can they get any pressure off the edge while you're still trying to find two capable corners that can lock down. Corey Raymond's back in town, and there's a lot of fanfare with that. But just like in recent years, cornerback is still a question, although I think they've got a lot of young talent there and returning talent that they can make a go of it. But the interior defensive line is just like I said, that is the weak link on the football team. They've got some bodies there. They can't afford any injuries for certain. But again, you go to Las Vegas, if you can win that opener. I think probably the best on LSU's schedule is Ole Miss, and you get them at home.
Is there any chance Lincoln Riley can still try and get out of this game in the next 2 months?
Yeah. I don't think so.
Okay.
I mean, LSU fans, as soon as that thing was announced, the bookings for Vegas happened immediately 2 or 3 years ago. Vegas is going to be something that opening weekend.
Mike, I have a question. Last week, the Paul Maneri news going to South Carolina kind of came out of nowhere from my perspective. Boots on the ground right there in Baton Rouge. Was that something y'all saw coming? And how much of this move kind of goes forward with LSU not LSU baseball, but SEC baseball in general, as the money keeps growing for the SEC. They're right now the premier conference in baseball, but they're going to have an extra influx of cash to throw across that league. How much of this move was financial, and what that kind of is going to look like going forward in the SEC for Paul Maneri?
I think Maneri has been lurking around the stadium. He's been, he talked to Miami real hot and heavy last year. I think he's been antsy. He's told everybody that will listen that he wasn't ready to retire, and he missed the game, and he's bored. He's played more golf than he wanted to. I just think he was ready to get back into baseball. And look, he can say that he had a neck issue and all that. He was basically given the opportunity to retire. LSU was ready to make a change and brought Jay Johnson in, and of course won a national title in year 2. So I think the only thing that caught me off guard was I wasn't sure that anybody in a program like South Carolina would go for a guy his age when you've got a lot of great mid-major coaches out there that have a lot of baseball games. I told my South Carolina game, I said, I don't know if it's about right, but it sure seems to me this is equivalent of y'all hiring Lou Holtz in football a couple of decades ago.
Oh my goodness, that's not a compliment then with Paul Maneri as far as or Lou Holtz. We have Grayson Grunehafer, who covers Baylor recruiting, asked me to ask you about Destrehan wide receiver Philip Wright. I know Michigan, LSU have been on him, but apparently he might be taking a visit to Baylor. Do you know much about him?
Yeah, he's a really good prospect, and he's kind of kept his cards close to the vest. He's going to be very interesting to follow as to where he's going to end up.
All right. Anything else? Yes, for Mike. Mike, thank you very much. We appreciate it. That schedule for LSU in football was nasty. It really. How did they get USC and UCLA in the same year? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, they had a home and home, obviously with UCLA.
Right.
When Orgeron said the sissy blue remark, and of course lost that opener. If LSU loses this opener, that'll be 5 straight. So. 5 straight opening losses, so that they've got a breakthrough on that. But yeah, it is kind of odd to have both of them. But I actually think the schedule is very, very favorable when you look at who they've got, and you look at when Florida lands. Will Napier even be the coach at that point? Auburn has question marks. Ole Miss, you get them at home. Alabama, you get at home. You got to go to College Station, and then in the season, what is going to be probably the might be the marquee game, home game for LSU fans with Oklahoma. And so I think, look, all the SEC schedules, when everybody was complaining about should the SEC go to 9 games or 8. When the 8 schedules came out and everybody looked at them, everybody said, that's actually not bad. They did a darn good job of moving that around. But maybe people's opinions will change in year 2 or 3 of the league, depending on who rotates in on who. But I think most LSU people think that this schedule is actually very favorable, and I do too. Again, I think if they beat USC and they can get some semblance of a defensive line, they can be a much better team than I think they'd be in most years just because of the schedule.
The Oklahoma game, that's not a time. I had somebody in the chat, Paxton, asked, that time won't be known probably till what, maybe a week or 2 before?
Yeah, I suspect that is going to be an evening game. They did something a week ago that I've never seen before, where they actually gave a projected time slot of the remaining games on the schedule. Which is we've never seen that before, and it's kind of nice for people who are, planning, individual game trips and so forth. But as of right now, it looks like LSU's only morning game is at Williams-Brice in late September against South Carolina.
Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. Great to hear from you. Have a great summer. Mike Scarborough, TigerBait.com. We started out talking Les Miles.